mics are muted and that your video screen is also muted. So you can see that at the bottom of your screen. If you are muted, both the microphone symbol and the video symbol should be red. And if it's not red, please make it red so that way it's muted, just to limit audio interference and that way our presentation can go smoothly. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, feel free to let us know by typing your question in the chat. It's the easiest way for the questions to be seen. And if you want to specifically address your question towards our presenter or towards myself, you can, actually, if you don't have the chat screen open, you click the little chat bubble again at the bottom of your main screen to open the chat. And if you'd like to direct your chat specifically towards any one of us, you can click the drop down arrow, select who you would like to direct your question to, or else it's just going to be sent towards everyone. And your question will be answered throughout the presentation. If you have any other questions or any other concerns, feel free to let us know. We will be recording this presentation just so that way afterwards, if any of your friends miss it, or if you would like to go back to it, or there's just some things that you got to pick up on and you'd like to revisit them, you can revisit them afterwards. And after the presentation is over, I'll be sending everyone who attended this presentation the PowerPoint for we'll be sending the PowerPoint for this presentation, as well as a survey, just so that way we can see how best to serve you guys as students at UT Dallas interested in financial risk and money management. All right, so with no further ado, I'd like to welcome in our presenter. Miss Beverly Johnson has been so kind to come in and talk to us. She'll be going over financial basics and really just what are the next steps in order to cover these next, I guess, like your financial journey into financial independence, especially as people transition from college into a job or college into the real world. So take it away.
Thank you for allowing me to join. Can you hear me, Sandra?
Yes, I can hear you.
I just want to make sure I can be heard. Fantastic. Can you see my screen?
Yes, I can see your screen.
Okay, fantastic. So again, thanks for allowing me to join you today. I am going to talk about jumpstarting the journey to financial independence. And we're going to talk a little bit about what financial independence is. But before I get started, I just want to tell you just a little bit about myself. My bio is going to be at the end of the presentation, but basically what I do is I've been in corporate America, I've been a military officer, and I've done quite a few in corporate America, and now I work as a financial advisor, working with clients every day that are really trying to reach financial independence. So if I could create a top-down view, the preparation that you're doing for your life now in college is not about just getting a good job. It's about creating a financial path for yourself that really allows you to eventually hopefully not have to work every day and have earned enough money in your working years to propel you through the years that you will not be working.
If I could interrupt you just for a moment, but really so sorry. Your audio is coming in and out, so some words are more clear than others.
Okay. Okay, let me try to talk more directly into the audio. I'm gonna turn it up a little bit too. Hopefully that'll help. If not, honestly, I have a new computer, so I'm hoping that I'm talking into this computer. So again, I'm going to give you a top-down view of preparing for financial independence, because your journey right now through college is really all about preparing for retirement or financial independence. And we're going to talk a little bit about what that means. We're going to talk about some terms. I'm going to show you a schematic pretty much of what the financial planning process that I use looks like. We're We're going to talk about the components that relate to you specifically in your journey right now. We're going to talk about some tools and keys to success, and then we're going to close with some questions. So let's talk about terms, income versus wealth. A lot of times people think income is wealth, and it's not the same thing. Income is what you earn, and wealth is what you do with your earnings in order to sustain a positive portfolio for yourself. So wealth is about building long-term finances or long-term money that you don't actually have to work for. Saving versus investing. When you create an emergency fund, which I hope that you all have, and we'll talk about that, where you have money that you might use short-term, that's saving. Investing is how you're putting away money for the long term. There used to be a day when there's this thing called a pension, when your company would save for you. That doesn't really exist right now. Most of you will invest for your retirement. And if you haven't heard of it, that's the tool called the 401k plan. But I'll talk about that. Financial independence versus retirement. The reason why I talk about this is because some people do not understand there is a difference. When you retire, that means you've reached an age where you're old enough to collect Social Security, start withdrawals from your retirement that you've saved for the many years that you worked on. Financial independence is something that can happen at any age. Financial independence is about earning enough by the age 30, by the age 40, by the age 50, by the age 60, whatever age that might be, so that you don't have to work anymore. And the money that you earned and invested, you've assessed and gotten enough wealth in your life now that you don't need to work to pay your bills. So there's a significant difference between financial independence and retirement. One of the ideas that I focus on when I talk to my clients is victory versus victim. Victory is for those people that plan early in life of what they want their life to look like and manage and assess that process so that they can have a victory over their financial future. Some people become a victim to their best intentions. They have good intentions, but they haven't measured themselves, tracked themselves, and assessed whether or not they're reaching their goals. So they become a victim to their circumstances. That is not who you want to be. The other idea that you'll hear throughout this presentation is going to be deliberate. The only way to become a person that's going to have a victory is basically to be deliberate. Unless you're someone that's sitting on this call that's getting ready to inherit a great deal of money, most of us will have to work very hard to make sure the way our money comes in, the way we invest it, the way we spend it, sets us up for our future financial goals. So here's really the big picture. And this is the picture that I use with my clients. This is what we call creating the pathway to financial independence. It's about these 6 components: assessing how you earn money, assessing how you spend it, assessing how you're saving for both the short term and the long term, assessing how you borrow it, assessing how you spend it for even your children, and your parents are spending probably maybe some of it for you. They're helping you pay for your college. And then having the right type of protection or insurances. Those are the 6 major components that I assess with clients who are preparing for financial independence or retirement. The one ideal that I use with them is about how to be diligent and some of the tools that are significantly important to this process. You have to constantly assess and evaluate this process in order to reach financial independence. The components that I'm going to focus with on you today are going to be earning, spending, and borrowing. Those are going to be the most, and I'm going to tap just a little bit into saving for the future as it relates to spending. But those are going to be the three critical components for you as you transition from college to career. So these are two of the big picture tools that I use. And I'm going to give you one really small piece that I've learned through the many clients that I work with. It's not what you make, it's what you do with what you make. I have clients right now that make lots of money and they are not prepared for retirement simply because they spend everything that they make and they've not saved properly. So it becomes critically important, in my opinion, to assess how you're spending your money, not just how you're making it. And that's what the spending plan allows you to do. And you really have to be responsible to your spending plan. And we're going to talk a little bit about this when we talk about earning and spending. But if you don't have a spending plan or an income statement is basically just your spending plan for the year and how you assess it, then you should learn how to create one of these. And especially as you make the transition, you should learn how to use it. If you're not familiar with a net worth statement, that would be another tool that I think is critical. And you should take a look at your net worth every year. Basically, it assesses your assets minus your liabilities. And the whole goal of this is for this number to grow. So here you see that their total net worth is $1,327,500. That's something that has happened all the time. Some of you, when you leave college, may have a negative net worth because you have education loans. That's okay. What's important is to understand how you become less negative year over year to the point that you become positive and you can continue to grow more positive. So I talked about the three components that I want to address with you today. The first one is about earning. And I want to make some critical points about earning as you make that college to career transition. The first thing is your salary is not your take home pay. When I go in and teach classes face to face, talk about a spreadsheet that you use to evaluate your salary versus your take home pay. So if you go out for your and you get a job offer and they say we're paying $70,000 a year, that doesn't mean you're going to take home $70,000 a year. You have to assess what you're going to be spending on other things. Taxes, insurance that your employer is going to provide, medical, life, health, those things. And there may be other things that your employer is going to require for you to pay for so that you understand what your take home pay is going to be. Understand that taxes are going to be a huge part of that take home, and you need to assess what that really means from your earning power. Also, some of you may make a choice to be an employee for a big company, or some of you may make a choice to start your own business. Understanding the difference of what you're going to take home is huge. It's one of the biggest components between your salary and your take home pay has to deal with taxes. And to be honest with you, at this moment, self-employed people have more opportunities to reduce their tax liabilities than people that work for corporations. So if some of you are thinking about being entrepreneurs, I specialize in working with entrepreneurs. There are things that you need to understand about being an entrepreneur versus being an employee. The second college to career transition piece has to do with spending. you are going to have basic living expenses. You're going to have to pay your rent. You're going to have to pay food. You're going to have to pay electricity. You're going to have to pay all those things. But understanding that from that take home pay, you're also going to have debt payments that may be related to your car and that may be related to your college loan. You have to understand how that's going to subtract from your take home pay. Then you're also going to have saving and investing. So I tell every college student that is making a college or career transition, you have to start making contributions to the retirement plan that you're being offered at your company, at least at the level that's being matched. So the analogy that I use for that is that if someone walked up to you and said, if you give me $1, I'm going to give you back $2. Someone said, if you give me $10, I'm going to give you back $20. You wouldn't hesitate to pull that $10 out of your pocket, give it to them, so they could return $20 to you. Well, that's what companies are doing in your retirement plan. They're saying, if you give me $1, I'm gonna give you back some of that. So take this money. It's really important long term. So as soon as you can, most companies have automatic opt-in. Make sure that you opt in. But make sure that you understand what your living expenses are and what your debt payments are and how that's going to impact your take-home pay. So I want to talk about living expenses for just a few minutes. Every year I assess my living expenses. I look at what am I paying for my TV service? What am I paying for my cell phone? What am I paying? You need to constantly assess these things because a lot of times they tend to go up. You may or may not even realize it. And there may be opportunities out there to reduce those expenses in a way. If you can reduce your payment $50 a month, that's an extra $600 a year that you can use something else. Also, when it comes to saving and investing, when it comes to the saving and investing piece of your take home, I tell people there are other things that you also need to look at. You need to look at having an emergency fund. So if you don't have an emergency fund, one of the first things besides putting money in your 401k that you need to do is create that emergency fund. What's going on in the world right now is a perfect example of why an emergency fund is necessary. If there is emergency, you don't have to worry about running out of money and you will be able to pay your bill. Depending upon what kind of job you have, it is recommended that you have 3 to 6 months of living expenses available for the emergency. That is a critical part of what you should do as you transition into your career. There are other investment tools out there, but that's something that if you're not familiar with a Roth account, besides investing in a traditional 401k, I always recommend you always invest in a Roth. So if you don't understand what that's about, that's beyond the breadth of what I'm going to discuss today. But both of those things are critically important getting into the career. So the last critical element has to do with goals, and it obviously goes back to both your college loans and that ultimate number that feeds back into your take-home pay minus your spending. That has to do with how you borrow the funds, the spending related to car loans or other expenses that you may have that you may just put on credit card. So what amazes me the most, especially when I work with younger people, is that they don't understand that if you go to finance a car paying 12% interest when the going rate may be 3 or 4% does not make sense. You really have to understand interest and understand interest can hamper your life for a long, long time. I had a client that is now in a debt management plan that when I met them, one of the reasons that they came to me was they had credit card debt at 30% of $100,000 worth of credit card debt at 30%. It would have been impossible for them to pay that off in their life. But the real option is to never build up that credit card debt. Credit cards are probably going to be the most expensive debt that you will have in your life. Make sure that you understand the interest rate related to it. And if you have to use a credit card, make sure that you have a strategy to pay it off. I do work with some clients that didn't understand this. And you know what? If your strategy can be to transfer to a zero interest credit card for 18 months and work real hard to get it paid down within that 18-month period, I think that's a good strategy. But the point of this is that interest rates can make you or break you. There are things and times to buy things. Right now, again, great time to make purchases because interest rates are low. But understand how interest impacts you long term because it goes back to that budget, take home pay, what you're spending. I've noticed that the biggest mistakes that are made with young people making that transition has to deal around car loans and has to deal around how they use their credit card. So those are the two things that I think we should focus on. Not that you have to have a car. Most people to get to work, you work in the city, so you have to drive to. But if interest rates are high, understand that you don't need to buy a Mercedes Benz. Maybe you're going to buy a used car that has a more feasible payment, and understand that sometimes a short-term sacrifice for having that really great car means a long-term gain. Just to give you a little personal story, when I was working in corporate America, I had a great job, but I drove the same cars for 10 years. I would buy a car, I would pay it off for 10 years, drive the same car for 10 years. And my brother used to always say bad things about me. He used to always harass me. You can afford a new car, you can afford a new car, you should buy a new car. But I didn't like car payments. Something about him, I just didn't like having a car payment. So it felt more freeing to drive my car knowing it was paid for. Um, Not too long ago, my brother and I were talking about how he used to harass me because my brother always had a new car. Now my brother has used cars all the time. He said, "Man, I should have listened to you a long time ago about not having to buy those new cars." So yes, understanding where those loans are, where those interest rates are, how much you're paying towards debt is critically important. What you have to remember, if you're paying towards debt, you're not paying towards your investing, which is going to create that ultimate wealth. So I'm going to leave you with 5 keys to success. First of all, you have to sit down and define what your goal is. You're going to have short-term goals, you're going to have intermediate goals, and you're going to have long-term goals. And that's a lot about what is our life planning cycle. When you're coming out of college, probably some of your first goals are going to be about paying down debt and maybe saving for your emergency fund, starting that 401k. And a lot of young people right now are planning a savings for a down payment on a home. That's what I see as the goals for younger clients. As you get older, you get married, you have goals for maybe even a bigger house, you have goals for how you're going to help your kids get through college, you have other things that come into play. But ultimately, the long-term goal is how do I earn and build enough wealth so that I do not have to worry about earning an income. I have a lot of clients that are currently retired. They did what they needed to do during their working years. Now they're enjoying their retirement. It is a wonderful place to be. And even at 20 something, might not be able to see that, hey, I want to be retired, but you should start planning for that because it'll be here before you know it. If you want to be successful, you have to constantly analyze your income. So I'm a firm believer of you should expect your income to grow over time. The peak earning years are between the ages of 40 to 50, but you have to be your own best advocate when it comes to income, looking for opportunities to get promoted and to increase your earnings, and then understand that part of that increase is to spend more money on investing for your future. To this day, like I said, I have plenty of clients that make a lot of money, but they have not managed their spending well, and because they're still not as prepared where they need to be. So from a behavioral standpoint, making sure you analyze your income and grow your income and to really manage your spending are two key things. The other thing is you're young, you're probably going to get married, you're going to have kids. When you do those kinds of things, you need to be aware of the spending habits of the person that you're marrying. That's a whole nother presentation in and of itself. But understanding the potential mate's spending habits are critical important to your long-term success. And the final thing you need to do is track what you're doing, making sure that you're using spending plans and making sure that you're using that net worth statement. The analogy that I use is that if I told myself I was going to lose weight and I never step on a scale to actually see if I'm losing it, how do I know? You don't. You have to have a tool for your financial health, and those are two great tools, especially for young people. So with that said, there's one thing to never forget. I've tried to give you some tools. I've tried to give you a perspective of what I think are the three critical things that college to career transition you need to be aware of. But remember, even if you don't get out of the gate well, there's always an opportunity to catch up. So you just need to be thankful for where you are, and know that you have some tools and you have the ability to eventually reach your goal. With that said, this is a little bit about me. And at this time, if anyone has any questions, I'd be more than happy to take your questions.
Yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to either type it out, or at this time, if you want to use your mic to just verbally ask a question, go ahead and ask it. Okay, so Caleb has a question. He says, is it ever worth it to put money into a 401k if I'm planning on early retirement?
So my question is, what money are you planning to use to retire early? Most people use a 401k. I have had clients that actually use real estate to help retire early also. So Caleb, my question would be, if you have a different journey that you're planning to make to retire early, other than using your retirement assets in the 401k, then yes. Then no, you may not need it. But most people, even if you retire at 59 and a half, that's considering retiring early, which would be the first time you get access to 401k assets. I have a lot of small business owners. I have small business owners that can retire today and not work in their company, but they still put money into a retirement plan because they're deferring the tax benefits. So people use retirement plans for a lot of different reasons. Sometimes it's tax deferral into the future when they're going to leave their company. Sometimes it's to build up the assets right now to be prepared for retirement. So the question is, it depends. I have to understand what your big picture is.
Good question. Um, Brittany has. I'll ask Brittany's question and then I'll go back to your second question, Caleb. Brittany says, if you have a 401k, is it worth it to transfer it into an IRA?
So the reason why you would transfer into an IRA. So if you have a 401k, you can't have an IRA. When you hear people that say, hey, I rolled over my 401k to an IRA, that's typically for two reasons. Sometimes people do that because the 401k plan allows them to do that at age 59 and a half. The other reason people do it is because they leave that company. And every time you leave a company, you can take your 401k plan and you can typically roll it into your new company's 401k plan, or you can roll it into an IRA. What people choose to do depends upon the 401k plan at the new company that they're going to, or it depends upon how much independence they want to manage the investments and make their own investment choices. I have a lot of rollover 401ks. A lot of people leave the company and they want to work with me independently to decide what they want to invest in. And because when you have a 401k, you only have the investment choices that are on that platform. You don't get to invest outside of that. People that have an IRA don't have a 401k.
Awesome. Uh, oh, thank you for expanding upon your question, Caleb. Okay, so Caleb's second question is, how long does it take for the extra leverage provided by a tax-deferred account? Um, Wait, hold on. Let me repeat that. How long does it take for the extra leverage provided by a tax-deferred account um, to beat the early withdrawal penalty, assuming 7 to 8% growth?
First of all, I don't think you should ever withdraw from early withdrawal penalty. To take a penalty, I think there are hardship reasons to withdraw. Um, you're always going to have both. So when you take a withdrawal, you've got two things hitting you. You've got the 10% penalty, plus it's being taxed against your income. So it's taxed as like it was income. So if you made $50,000 that year, you take 20,000 out of your 401k. Now you're being taxed on 70,000. So what it would take to overcome that, it just depends upon where you are, what percentage of money you pay to your taxes. So there's no finite person with no finite answer to that. It would have to be individually based to make that calculation. But I'm a fond believer of, unless you're making a hardship withdrawal for some reason, try not to take an early withdrawal from you.
Awesome. Any other questions that we have? Okay, great. Jasmine asks a really pertinent question, actually. She says, do you have any spending/savings advice in response to the current economic state as it's affected by COVID-19?
Yeah, I do. So the biggest advice I would have is you need to have an emergency fund. I have so many people right now that are realizing, because even though the COVID-19 has all this money, and again, I work with a lot of businesses, but even though you're going to get a $1,200 check, some people are, even though you might get unemployment, even though you might be able to get these business loans, so there's lots of stimulus out there. The real question is, when are you going to get it? And that's the big unknown right now. Because that's an unknown, it becomes really critical to have, especially if you have a family, to have an emergency fund. And that's about the saving part of it. Have an emergency fund so that if you had to be off work for 3 weeks, 3 months for some reason, you have enough money to pay your bills. I think that's the most important thing anybody can do. I raised my kids as a single parent, and I always had an emergency fund because I was always afraid something might happen. So whether you're married, especially when you're single, I think you have the opportunity. And I don't care if you put $100 a month in. If you put $100 a month, that's still better than nothing.
That's great advice. Thank you. Brittany has another question. She says, suggest investing in stock right now while the market is down.
Wow. The answer to that is I'm going to tell you this. I have lots of money flowing into investment accounts because the stock market is down. So here's what I say. The objective of the stock market is to buy cheap and sell high. So you tell me, is everything cheap right now? I think the answer to that is yes.
That's a good point. Any other questions that we have? Going once, going twice. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. If there's no other questions, I'd just like to round out our meeting by again reminding you that if in the future you have any other questions, you can, so the Common Sense Money Management Center, if you haven't used our services before, a lot of our model is based off of workshops like these and one-on-one appointments. So we are still doing one-on-one appointments for the semester. However, they will look a little different, obviously, because we aren't in our office. So you can still go to our website if you type in UT Dallas Common Sense and book an appointment the way you normally would, and select the times that work for you. And usually appointments are 30 minutes and we can talk about anything or any questions that you have related to finances or budgeting or even we've answered like questions about internships or like helping people get onto the job market and things like that. But primarily finance related questions. And we also have the rest of our workshops planned out for the rest of the semester.